right. Well, thanks everyone for jumping on. I guess let's start out just with anyone who had any success stories over the weekend that they would want to share as far as their business. One thing that most of you guys probably saw in the news is that in Washington, they switched it back to real estate is essential business, which is impactful here because if it lessens the probability that we would have real estate changed to non-essential too. So
same for the state of California.
Oh, they changed too. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Megan.
Yep.
But yeah, who worked this weekend? Did you work this weekend, Megan?
Yeah. Showed a house, showed it on Friday, wrote an offer Saturday morning. Got beaten out in multiple offer situation, but there's still multiple offers. So I'm looking on the bright side. Oh, wait,
yeah,
can you hear me?
Yeah, that's what
Okay.
I've been thinking too. A lot of, because there's such little inventory, every house has multiple offers now. So it is still good. People are still. Now, did you actually show the house?
Yeah.
And
yeah, the client and I saw 3 houses.
What extra precautions you took and how you handled that?
I have a ton of rubber gloves. We're using hand sanitizer. All 3 properties were vacant as well, which I think just adds another level of like comfort to everybody going into other homes. And just gave the client new gloves at every house. I have like a crazy light behind me that's making everything bright.
Cool.
Angelic.
Thank you for sharing. That's
You're
great.
welcome.
Who else had something good happen over the weekend? Any success stories about, and it doesn't have to necessarily be work, but just connecting with people that would eventually turn into.
We got a new listing, so that's great.
Okay, tell us about it.
Yeah, well, we had sent out a mailer, and then we've actually gotten 4 new listings out of that. And so the one of the people, she owns like 19 commercial properties, quite a few. The other lady, she's given us one of her buildings, but she also owns multiple properties. And then we just got an executed listing agreement too from this week. So there's actually 4 that we're working with on as a result of this mailer that we sent out. So that was great news.
That's incredible. And it's such a good reminder that you can do things from home that are going to bring in business. And then did you actually go meet them, or did you do a Zoom meeting, or what did that look like?
A couple of them that we met, and 2 we still need to meet. And yeah, it was just, keeping our distance, not touching anything, wearing gloves, all of that. And everybody's good with it. So we're just careful. We did a showing, it was an empty building, used gloves, handed out gloves to the folks on the tour as well. Yeah, so.
That's great. And it's like you said, it's all about the client's comfort level, right? Somebody asked, can you tell us more about the mailer? I know you told us a little bit last time, but for those who weren't on, or 2 times ago, if you could just maybe share a little bit about that.
Yeah, just sent out a great big long list to people, carefully crafted letter. We actually used a writer for it so that she could just frame it, and then I went in and edited it afterwards. So I really liked the tone of it and the feel of it, and just sent out first class mail so I could verify that all the addresses were good. And for those that we get returned, be able to update our list, and then this time around we'll be able to send it out through bulk postage, which will be less expensive the next time we do it. So it was personalized, it had each person's name on it. It had the address that they own, just said, hey, now's a great time to sell. It was really geared towards sellers. And
did you talk specifically anything about COVID-19, or it was just it's kind of a good time to sell?
Just a good time to sell. We crafted the letter before COVID-19, so this thing had been in the works for about a month, and it was just a huge coincidence that everybody's at home and reading their mail now. So that worked out well. But it basically said interest rates are at an all-time low, inventory levels are low. Now is a great time to be a seller. Give us a call if you have any questions.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Linda has a couple questions on here pertaining to buyers. Is anyone using the COVID addendum or is it more of like a contingency opt out for the buyer? Megan, when you wrote that off for this weekend, did you use it? You're on mute.
Yep. Yeah, we used it. I didn't have any sort of, like, client seemed really happy with that kind of terminology, and the agent didn't like balk on it whatsoever.
So are you viewing it though as a contingency for the buyer? Because the way that I read that is
It protects the seller more than the buyer, in my opinion.
okay, so yeah, because it looks like the seller is in control of if and when they terminate the contract.
Yeah, I
It
just,
doesn't look like there's a buyer opt out in it.
I need to reread it. I just think it helps with any sort of timelines that we might need to push back.
Yeah, the
And
deferment part.
Yeah, and that's really what I feel is protecting the buyer, is
Mhm.
pushing back any necessary timelines.
Yeah, okay. All right.
It might make people feel more comfortable about doing things now
Mhm.
versus pushing it off. And then Linda, let's talk about your other question. Has anyone,
Can I?
Oh.
Oh, sorry.
go
No,
ahead.
I wanted to make one more comment on that because my seller viewed that COVID-19 as kind of like a contingency for the buyer. And I just didn't read that. I'm not sure how to reassure them. They're kind of nervous, but you know, it's not like an inspection. I mean, I think the buyer has more of an opt out that they can't get financing than, you know, the COVID addendum, but I don't know. It's new. I haven't used it.
You know, that's an interesting perspective because I know a lot of you guys have listings. Are you receiving offers mostly with it, with the addendum, without it? How are other sellers interpreting that? Alex, have you guys had any offers come in with an addendum?
I believe, yes, we have had offers come in with the addendum, and we went proactively on all our deals and sent out the addendum, whether we were a buyer or seller, that was pending. We haven't run into any issues with it, but some people have wanted further explanation, and I think most people have come to the conclusion that agrees with Megan that that it protects the seller a little bit more than the buyer. I think we lost a sale as a result of the buyer getting laid off. But yeah, that's what we're doing.
Okay, thanks for sharing. And I see
Yeah.
some things. I don't believe Mike is on. Let me just see. Mike, are you out there? No, I don't think so. But that is something maybe we can do another, maybe on Wednesday's call, is just going to go through that addendum or have Mike talk about some of the contingencies. Okay, great. And yeah, if you guys have any other ideas or things you want to talk about, these are intended just to be a collaboration, so we can go any direction that we need to go to help better support everyone. Linda, do you want to talk about your other question?
Yeah. So my other question is, I've only used early possession twice in my career. So number one, has anybody else used it? And then number two, really specifically, how would you view the buyer then painting the house or installing new carpet in the house? The addendum speaks to structural changes, and you know, structural sort of, to me, alludes to, you know, changing the actual structure, but would those kinds of changes from that?
Anyone want to chime in on that?
We use early possession in leases, but I'm not sure on the residential real estate side what you're referring to. Can you give me a little bit more background? I might be able to give you some input on what we do.
Okay, so a buyer, we get to closing date, they can't close, but they still want that we're pushing out extending the close another probably week to 2 weeks, but the buyer wants to move into the house.
Okay.
And so we're doing early possession, but then further, the buyer, well, the buyer already did it. They painted several rooms inside the house and never mentioned it to the seller. Of course, the neighbor mentioned it to the seller. So it's gotten a little complicated. I haven't addressed it quite this morning. I needed to fortify myself.
Yeah.
My happy hours are moving to 9 a.m. But you know, when I reread the document about 10 times, it really refers to structural changes. So is paint and carpet a structural change?
So two things. One is that with early possession, I'm assuming that your buyer has insurance already activated on the building and that he's
Yes.
using licensed bonded contractors.
Well, I don't know. There was no permission requested. So
Hey,
So all
Linda,
of that is a little bit weird in that it should be licensed bonded contractors. Usually there's a rent back period on a pro rata share per day of what they would pay to have that early possession. And all modifications would be made with written consent. So that's on the commercial side. I would think there'd be language in place that also would make that applicable to the residential as well. So your guy should not be making any changes without the seller written consent, for sure.
well,
Uh,
the early possession addendum does not refer to modifications. It refers to structural changes.
Linda, from my standpoint, since I do a lot of multifamily,
Mhm.
I would be very cautious about letting anybody have possession early on, because what happens if you don't close, you're going to have to go through an eviction. And right now, especially with the way that the no eviction law, you know, we have that in place, you could really get your sellers into a lot of trouble. So I would really recommend that you stay away from that in order to reduce your liability.
I hear you 100%. Believe me, like I said, I've done it like twice in my career. And anyway, yeah.
I would tell
The
you,
horse has left
you know,
the barn.
yeah,
Oh,
I would
okay,
tell you
gotcha.
on the residential side, it is more common on the commercial side. And there's actually a firm that the Oregon board put together for us to be able to do this. And like Linda said, it doesn't speak to cosmetic changes. And so if we're going to do something like this in the residential side, and I've already been asked to do it, and I said no, just because it is so problematic right now, even being able to get financing, right? So I had a transaction here last week and was supposed to close Monday. My client was flying up, my seller client was flying up from California to sign on Monday. And on Friday, I got a call from the broker saying that his jumbo loan was not going to be funded. That the lender that they were placing the loan with said, we're not funding any more jumbo loans. And so now, you know, we have that end of the uncertainty that we get to deal with too. So if you move someone into the client and you think that, you know, it's all good because they're approved, unfortunately, that world is changing now. Right. And so we did run into that in 2008. I had several jumbo loan sales fail all like in 30 days because the lender stopped loaning jumbo money. So anyway, we have to be doubly careful. My question for Linda is, did you increase the earnest money and make it non-refundable?
Yeah, we did. We had 25,000 earnest money released, non-refundable to the seller. And we also removed any contingencies, including financing and COVID-19. But then, you know, the buyer went and got the keys on Saturday and painted the place. I'm like, oh
Well,
my God.
So what was the sale price?
1185. So
Okay,
it's
so
both
so you
fell
got
apart.
so you bumped the earnest money to 25,000 on a 1-1. So
Mhm.
I can tell you in my career, I would never let a buyer move into a property. Let's say I had a $500,000 sale with a 5,000 earnest money. Not going to happen. Never, ever. 10,000 earnest money, not going to happen on a $500,000 sale, right? And so
Yeah.
we have to be very, very careful if we're going to go down this road, because you, like Gary said, you have to plan now that they actually may not be able to get financing, and they're in the home and they can't be evicted. And what the heck? Now, where did the owner go to accommodate the sale, thinking that it was all going to happen, that because they were approved? Ours, we were waiting for loan docs to be drawn, and then the bank waited until the last second.
Yeah, no,
So-
I agree. It's hugely
Yeah.
problematic.
Yeah, so
Or
we have to be
want-
very careful as an office.
Yeah, the
I
seller
think in
wanted
this-
money, and you know, I mean, I talked to you, you know, multiple options. So yeah, I mean, you know, it's trying to figure it out and make her happy, and you know,
I think in
aside
this
from
case,
the,
oh, sorry.
So I have a question.
yes,
If the early possession agreement specifically, unless it's changed, I haven't read it for a while, specifically states they are not tenants under Oregon law. So how does that affect the eviction process? They're not tenants when the early possession.
yeah,
Well,
I
that's
don't know. And we specifically did remove the ability for them to claim any kind of tenancy as a added language to it.
Yeah, and the trick is that addendum that was created by ORF was not intended to be 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months. It was tended to be, right? So it wasn't even built for that. And so we use it, this is my fear, we use it thinking that the buyer is approved, and then, you know, they send it through one more underwriter on the day that, or 2 days before we're supposed to close, and that underwriter says, we don't want to fund these anymore. And so, you know, what we were thinking was going to be a few days now is potentially a few months. And then the additional risk is, what happens to those buyers? Let's say it's a dual income family, one of them gets laid off, right? Let's say it's a single income family, and that person gets their hours cut back. Now they can't even get a loan, and they're in the house. And so there is another issue that comes, and I'm not going to scare the hell out of everybody, but we have to be very, very careful on these, because there is another issue, and the issue is they move in and now they can't get financing. Something has changed, and now they can't get financing. So now they don't know where they're going to go, because they don't have a place to go. And like Gary said, maybe they don't move out, and maybe they contest the amount of earnest money that they gave up. I mean, I don't know. You can do that, right? You can contest that. So I was advised many years ago with my attorney that if you keep someone's money, a large deposit, and they move in and then they can't get a loan, and then you go to court, the court is going to look at it and say, well, what were the damages to the owner to justify the size of the earnest money? And court can trim the earnest money down. And in our case, using the sale agreement, it might be the arbitrators, right? It might be three judge arbitrators, 3 attorney arbitrators, probably judges that are retired. So that is also a risk. So anyway, I mean, those are just considerations for everybody that's listening, because I've run into all of them.
Megan, did you want to add anything?
I was just saying, like, as Linda said, the horse is already out of the barn on this one. So I think we all know, like, that's not an ideal situation. So I was just saying, like, you're doing the best that you can do at this stage, and asking these questions is a good thing. And I mean, at least they got carpet and new paint in their house if things fall apart.
Yeah, it's kind of good to look at this one as like a 2-part question. 1, for Linda's specific scenario, but 2, okay, what if some of our other buyers ask about that? How are we going to proceed? And it sounds like the general consensus is that it's not a great idea right now just because Oregon is giving so much leniency to tenants. And
Well, I don't think it's ever been a great idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in
Extra.
general, it is not a place we ever go. And, you know, but we're sort of in a little bit different world.
Right.
Well, and that may be where your option, Linda, is you close with the second. And your seller just says, you know what, I'm going to lock in this price that I'm getting today. I'll close with the second and, you know, weigh all those differences and then potentially make, you know, a decent amount of money on a second. So some owners will do that. We will have owners that will carry seconds in this market because rates are so low on anywhere they're going to put cash. And so they're going to say, you know, I'll carry a second for 5 years. Heck, that sounds like a good deal to me. And maybe that works. And maybe that's safer than letting somebody move in, you know, and then potentially the loan's taken away because of a change in something.
Well, his attorney advised him to not do the second.
Oh, he did. Okay.
Yeah. So the attorney said, no, don't do the second. And then we kind of went right up one side, circled around, came back, went down, and ended up back at this early possession. Now, what I'd like everybody to do is be saying a little prayer or Hail Mary or whatever you do, that this really closes in the next week and it's all good.
I wanted to share one other story just really quick. My sister ended up buying a property here not too long ago, and the owners wanted to stay in a little longer, and I had told my sister that I didn't think that it was a good idea, but it was such a great house. She decided that she was going to be okay with it. And when we came to actually take possession of the house, they had had a huge bonfire where they had actually thrown furniture and all sorts of nasty chemical stuff into the fire. And we went after them, and we got them to come and clean the whole thing up and mitigate the issue. But that's a good example of getting someone in early, or that was the buyer stayed past closing. So that's another problem that can happen. So, you know, that's just another thing that happened with our guys. So I wanted to share that.
Well, yeah, just to since we're talking about some of the seller bewares and the buyer bewares, I can tell you that in the last downturn, we sold homes where it closed and then the seller moved out, and then they took things with them that they weren't supposed to. They took like hood vents. I had a guy that took a copper custom-made hood vent on a home. He just literally took it right out from between the cabinets and said, there's no way I'm going to leave that. Let them sue me if they want it back. And so anyway, you know, I've seen a few things happen here lately, even with my own transactions. And I'm thinking, okay, God, I wish you would have written all this down, because, you know, now I'm going to go, these things are going to come back to the forefront of my mind as we start to see these things again. So we have to be careful of everything.
Thanks for sharing those, because yeah, we might end up with a lot more unique situations. So just make sure you're running those by Mike, someone else in our office, some of these, again, the agents who've been through some of these different downturns and have seen some of these situations. Let's switch gears a little bit and turn it over to Josh. Josh, can you give us an update from the mortgage side, the lending side? What is going on in your world?
Sure, sure. So finally got my video working here, so you can see shaving has not been my strong point since I've been home. But things are still moving on our end. To Dwight's point, though, until the deal is done, you want to be careful and diligent. Make sure you're protecting your clients. One of the things that we've always done is done verifications, verbal verification appointments within 10 days of closing. However, we are now doing them all, and most lenders are doing this the day of closing. to ensure that if anything has changed, that is taken into account. I've had one deal where a client, dual income, where one of the borrowers lost their job, and so they weren't able to complete their transaction. I had one guy who got laid off the day after closing. So they were already in the house, but it was the day after. So there is a lot of variables and stuff going on out there. In terms of rates, where rates are at, rates are still strong right now. They look good. Mortgage bonds were up today, then they came back down a little bit. So it's still very volatile. What we've been telling clients is if they're in a position where where current pricing is, that they want to lock and move forward rather than sort of gamble with where the market is going to be, because you just don't know. Government mortgages, so FHA, VA, USDA, Govy loans right now are really weird. So the pricing on Govy loans is higher than it's been, and part of the reason why is because Ginnie Mae, who is the backer and the funder of those types of loans, is not part of the government stimulus package, and it's causing zero servicing value to those loans right now, and so they're not being bought on the secondary market, which is making the pricing for those loans extremely high right now. So not necessarily the rate being high, but the cost to get them. So if you have clients that are using those types of products, please make sure that they are connecting with their lender before they're putting in offers to make sure that they aren't priced out of the market for something like that right now.
What products are those specifically?
USDA, Govy loans, so USDA, FHA, VA, and Native American loans. So all those that are essentially backed by HUD types of programs, and they are funded through Ginnie Mae.
So the price, the rate is good, but then now the price to acquire that loan has gone up.
The rates are okay.
Oh, okay.
Say good, but they're okay. But
Okay,
we're talking about the so it's more basically the points to get them that's really high, and so you see fluctuations and volatility with that as well. But right now it's higher than normal. Again, if you have clients that are using those types of products and possibly could switch over to conventional, so traditionally, FHA has, had lower rates, lower points, sometimes lower mortgage insurance than maybe doing a 3% or 5% down conventional program. But currently, that might not necessarily be the case. So it's one of those things, if you have clients using those products, reach out to them, make sure that they're connecting with their lender, and and confirming sort of which is going to be the best program for them if they're actively looking right now. That doesn't necessarily apply to the bond programs, so like the Washington bond, in case anybody does Washington. That program is still strong. But other than that, that's sort of my update for today, unless anybody's got any specific questions.
What are you seeing on jumbos as of, through the weekend today? Any updates on your end on who's doing them?
Yeah, so, I mean, we've still got a couple that we're able to do. Again, it's one of those things so that when I go to pre-qualify somebody on something like that, we are going to, we're going to look at it more than one way. Could they do a first and a second instead of doing a jumbo? And we've got a portfolio lender that we work with locally, the same portfolio lender that we do the cross collateral loan with. I know I've talked about that a lot, but they portfolio everything, and they're still looking for business. They don't have they don't really have a jumbo or conforming cap because everything's in house, and so we're still able to broker our some jumbo stuff through them as well. So they're a great program, but yeah, a lot of programs are, you know, sort of in question, and make sure you have a backup plan if you're gonna be utilizing, you know, a jumbo program right now.
In this conversation, I know we're getting ready to switch to a different topic, but I do want to make this point. My belief is that the days of having a seller move out on the closing day are over. We need to go back to what we saw for many years after the downturn, which was the sellers had, say, 3 days, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, depending on what you could negotiate. And that way the sellers aren't moving out, loading up and moving out before they get their money. And so it's different if they have to leave, and it doesn't matter if the sale fails at the last minute. But for a while there in 2009 and 10, we had quite a few loans because the lenders switched to verifying everything again, as Josh mentioned, right before closing. So 10 days before closing, maybe they only verified them once in a really, really good market, right? And then we closed. Then they were verifying them 10 days before closing. Now they're verifying them the day before closing, which means if there's any change in accounts, if there's any change in job status, in debt, you know, suddenly they don't get the loan. So we can't have our sellers moving out. And so I think that whole mindset is over. We have to think in terms of, okay, let's close, get the seller the money, and then they'll move out. So we schedule the movers for the day after, or even 2 days after, and then cleaning people after that.
Great tips. And thank you, Josh. Oh, geez, sorry. That's my landline. I didn't know it rang. We're going to go back to Mike. Sorry. We're going to switch it back to Mike to go through the addendum because he's on now and there were some questions about it. So we'll just do that really briefly, go through it, and then we'll kind of go back around to see what everyone's hearing from buyers and sellers. But this is pretty important because we want to be able to speak to this well. And Austin, we are ready. Okay, take it away, Mike. Mike, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Okay, hold on one second. I don't see the unmute here.
Oh, you're off now. We can hear you now.
Okay, great. Okay, before we go into this, I just wanted to touch one point on Dwight's comments. I've always believed and still think Dwight's idea is great. I've always put possession 4 days after recording of deed, because not only does it protect you if it fails, it also gives some leave time for between the sale and the purchase. So if the purchase of your house is delayed a bit, you don't have to jerk around your purchase because you have a couple of days sitting in there. Anyway, that's my 2 cents in there. The 096 OREF form that I believe you were talking about earlier, that's a very easy form. I'll be glad to walk through it line by line for everybody, but essentially it says at the beginning is if there's a delay, it builds in 20-day by default business day delay in closing if in fact there's something that has to do with COVID-19. So if there's a delay in lending or something like that, it automatically has both parties agreeing that they will extend for up to 20 days to go ahead and you can put any time frame you want in there, but it allows you to have that period of delay, be able to rectify those issues. And it's renegotiable at the end of that time. So say, you need a 20-day delay and it looks like it's going to be 25, you can extend it or whatever. But essentially, gives you an ability to automatically agree that based on environment that we're in now, there can be changes, there can be both lender issues, there can be personal issues. What if one of the parties gets sick or something crazy? But it allows you to make adjustments to the closing date, which everybody's going to agree to in the very beginning, and also discloses that that might happen. Hopefully that answers the questions that were put forth earlier.
Thanks, Mike. And if anyone else has questions right now, oh yes, and Pam just said, so it's not a contingency, correct? And it's just a extension of the timeline. Can you confirm that, Mike?
Give me. Sorry. Well, it's not a contingency in the fact that if it doesn't happen in 20 days, you're out of there. It just simply extends a closing date for you. I mean, if you have it acts as a contingency because it says, gee, if you can't close on the time and it's related to the COVID-19, then in fact, both parties agree to extend the contract up to another, whatever day you put in there, or the 20 days which is the default.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
My heard? Oh, okay, good. So yeah, I guess it's a extension is available should any one of these following matters take place up to 20 days, but it is not something that would then, if closing, it's not, like you said, it's not a contingency that then if it shall not close, it's not like they get their earnest money back, or this is a contingency should something related to COVID-19 happen to delay past, like let's say past 20 days. Let's say it even gets delayed past 20 days. Is that an option to terminate the agreement?
In the event the extension expires, to agree. The verbiage is that in the event this extension expires, that both parties may agree in writing to an additional extension of time. Seller may terminate the transaction. All deposits will be returned to the buyer. So in that form, yeah, they can. Plus, if they're, if you have a COVID-19 issue and then you add into, they don't get the loan, then they were out by the loan contingency. And it's,
right. Yeah, no, I'd understand that. Of course, if it fell into your normal contingency categories due to anything related here, I would understand that. I guess I was a little bit confused by this and having a challenge kind of explaining some questions that were asked. So I just thought as you were explaining it to a buyer or seller, if you had like a sort of just cover, 30-second, like, hey, this is what this form is. And it sounds like we've kind of gone over that, but
I think it's just simply says, hey, we live in a little bit of troubled time. This agreement gives us some flexibility with the closing as it relates to the COVID-19 issue. So other contingencies may apply based on not getting their loan or anything else, but essentially gives you some flexibility with closing. And I think that's what you say, explain. And then if they aren't comfortable with that, then you almost can read it verbatim. I don't want you interpreting it. I'd prefer you sort of explaining it word by word as it's written.
Sure, okay. And this is, and I'm sorry, I think I know this, but this is for the buyers, or the buyer's agent is the one that puts this together?
It could be from either party. It could be either in the original offer, or it could be as a counter offer. Remember, this document is not a unilateral extension. This is both parties have to agree to this. So if you decide halfway through the transaction that you think you're going to have some trouble and then add this contract, both parties have to agree because it's an extension closing date. And if you do it at the time of negotiation, everybody's usually pretty amiable. If you try to do it 3/4 of the way through it, it becomes more difficult, like everything does as you get towards the end. Everybody has greater tension in trying to do it. So my suggestion is, regardless of the side that you put this through, obviously both parties have to agree to it. So
Right. Okay. Thank you, Mike.
surely.
Yeah, thank you, Mike, for going through that. Austin, you can close out of that.
And by the way,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, by the way, if you have any questions with that or any of the other, just give me a call. I'm here. That's what I'm here for, to try to help you through those things that give you maybe an alternative as they're needed. So please feel free to give me a call and we can talk about those. Thanks.
Great. And hopefully our clients will see this as a benefit to them, that you are thinking about them on either side of protecting them in case there are delays that are out of our control. So hopefully that you can get that across. All right, what else are we talking about? Let's go back to if anyone had any other good successes or challenges or anything that they particularly wanted to talk about. I know a lot of people now are starting to use Command more because you have more time. So if there's anything specific about that, but really this is an open forum, so.
So you asked me to report Alex and everything in our virtual listing presentation.
Yep, Peter, will you speak up just a little bit?
Okay.
Oh, much better.
Alex and I did, we're back. Now I'm muted again. Are we good or no? Yes?
Austin, you need to mute Dwight.
Yep, we can hear you, Peter.
Okay. Just saying, Alex and I have only done one listing presentation via Zoom so far, and the listing documents went out yesterday to be signed. So, and it was competitive. The other agents actually showed up at the house. So.
Awesome! Congratulations.
Actually, part of it, I think she considered herself to be in the high risk category. So I think being, other than I went to the house for like 3 minutes to walk through it with gloves on and all that stuff. But other than that, and that was after they agreed. So it can be done.
Peter, do you think that because you did the presentation virtually and the other agent did it, do you think that played into them choosing you because you were taking this seriously and had an action plan?
Yeah, I was trying to say that at one point, but maybe I do think it did, because the wife considered herself to be in a high risk category and was concerned about it. So. That's also the one where they wouldn't turn on the video. After I went to the house, I found out why. But anyway, that's all I had to offer.
Thanks, Peter. But no, it's great. So showing a little sensitivity to the situation helped. What other questions are people getting from buyers and sellers about the market? What are you saying when your buyers say, should we stop looking? When your sellers say, should we take our listing off the market? How have people been responding to questions like that?
Hey, am I on? This is Pam again. Just gonna have this question obviously a lot. And, I think before any of us can answer that, I think it's finding out what it is that they're, might be concerned of or what their questions are, because we're in a twofold, it's a health crisis. It is one of our challenges right now. And then the other plays into, what is happening in the market, how can that affect them and the sale or purchase of a property. So I always ask, what is it? We're kind of, there are a number of questions people have right now. What are your concerns or questions? And some, have no concern over the health situation that we're in. And then some are just really concerned about their investment right now. And is the market, tanking, and isn't it going to be a good investment? So I think it's really finding out what concerns them, and what their questions are. Like Peter said, I mean, that he probably dove into knowing what, he knows that she had health concerns. His seller had health concerns, and he obviously had a underlying conversation with her and really knew what would what would make her feel comfortable and move the needle to them choosing him to other agents, because we know how big in-person is. I mean, that's the only way that I really get business, is getting in front of our clients. That's huge. So if he's able to get something where other agents in a competitive situation actually got in front of a client, he was listening to their needs better than people were that were actually getting that face-to-face time. And I think that really is just about meeting them where they're at, finding out what their concerns are, and then that conversation will unfold to where you can best help them from that.
The first question we asked was, how are you feeling about the current health environment? And like I said, you're absolutely right, Pam. That's where we started the conversation. And so it absolutely played into it.
That's great. Both of you being proactive as far as mentioning it and welcoming the questions from your clients rather than waiting for them to come up.
It's called IBM Sales Training 101, neutralize objections up front.
Love it. Love it. What other questions are y'all getting from buyers and sellers?
Not enough.
Let's talk about.
I just was muted. I was talking, and I forgot that they muted me. I just had a conversation with the past client yesterday, and what's happening is this couple is taking care of her mother, and her mother is slipping into dementia, and all kinds of other things are starting to come into play. A couple years ago, their attorney said, well, don't sell any of her property. She has 3-plex, a 21-plex, 5 houses. They said, well, don't sell any of these until she passes away, because then you won't have to pay any tax on anything. And so, they're putting money on their lines of credit, their home lines of credit, to pay for her health care and all the other things that are coming up. She's just massively stressed out. And at the end of talking to her, I'm literally going to go out today to look at one of those homes that she has in St. John's. And the conversation was, we don't really know how this is going to impact everything right now. We know that houses are really selling right now and rates are great, but we don't know what's going to happen to prices. We don't know if this is going to come back in the fall and bite us again in the fall. We really don't know any of those things. So it really is, well, what's the best strategy for today, knowing that the uncertainty will continue and maybe even the risks change. And so at the end of the conversation, she basically said, okay, I thank you so much. I've made up my mind. We're selling this house. And so they're going to put this house on the market. We'll probably put it on next week. So I've had that conversation with a few different people. I mentioned that I passed another one in a grocery store. She's a buyer. And I said, well, here's what happens. If prices come down, but rates go up 1%, then you're basically in the same place. But what if your job changes in the meantime? What if your job changes and something happens to the extent that you can afford more, but you don't want to? So there's other things that enter into this. And at the end of that conversation, she said, because she's reasonably self-employed, she said, well, I'm not worried about my job. I actually think it will go up. And I want to lock in low interest rates. And if they come down in the next couple of years, I don't care, because I expect to own this home for the next 10 to 15 years. That's my time range. So I think Pam was exactly right. We need to talk to people about, well, what's really important, what's happening. And, they'll come to the decision normally. They will.
Hey, Dwight.
Yes.
St. John's is North Portland. If you need directions, let me know.
I'm sending Marcella. She's probably on the call. She doesn't know this yet.
I'm not going anywhere.
Not kidding. I'll go up today. Yes, thank God, right? I can figure out how to get up there. I know it's up there somewhere.
Thanks for sharing that. And then Linda popped in a question about what types of behavior would cause you to drop an elderly client if they're showing some different behavior, and how would you position or present the reason for breakup?
Well, I've had a lot of them. I've had a few people that have had family members that have stepped in. So one way to do it is to say, I know this conversation is, or this process is difficult. Let's say you have their home on the market. I know this process is very difficult for you. Is there anyone that you communicate with on a regular basis that maybe I could talk to and just share with them what we're talking about, and maybe you'll get a different opinion? And so if you can get someone else into the mix, this woman who's I was talking to, my past client, she has power of attorney for her mother already. They saw this coming, and so they did power of attorney last summer. And so it is possible that you end up having to bring someone else into the equation that you can talk to, that knows how to speak to them, because they don't completely trust you. And so that would be probably where I'd start first.
Great advice. Anyone else want to chime in on that? All right.
Oh, I was just gonna,
Oh, go ahead.
I'm just wondering I agree with Dwight, and I'm sure Mike would also have something to say about this, because just to cover and protect yourself, I think when you're dealing with that sort of clientele, to have somebody, a family member or another person that can be involved in the decisions, document everything. And I think that's important. Just in that case, I think there was a class once that was geared towards working with the elderly. But then I guess I would just wonder the specific, I'm reading your what you wrote, Linda, and it says that they were having a senior moment, I guess senior moment behavior. So I guess I just wonder what that is, that you'd wonder why breaking up with them would be, what's the moments they're having, I guess. Because I was trying to keep things moving forward with elderly people, and with any transaction, but just sort of have milestones that need to be reached at certain times on a weekly basis, just keep things moving in the forward direction. Because I think certain clients and the elderly, it's hard to keep that forward momentum, which is what we're all trying to do with the end goal in mind, and need to move forward. So I guess it would just be what that senior moment is that your client's having. Which
I would say, go ahead, Peter.
If my advice would be that if you're sitting with an elderly couple and they have the senior moment and no one's really clairvoyant or with it, that you find the closest relative that is not, and get them involved, or some counselor right away, because I can tell you what happens when any of that becomes an issue is that there will be a relative that comes out of the woodwork. The term elder abuse is one of the scariest things on the planet. So if you think your clients aren't with it, my advice is you need to back up and make sure that somebody is there to advise them that it's close to them, or to avoid any potential. I speak from experience. It's about me. I have senior moments all the time. Okay.
All right, I guess I'm not senior enough to know what a senior moment means. So in that case, if it's that, yes, I agree. If they're not as lucid as you need, I absolutely agree. That's what a senior moment is. Got it.
Yeah, I think anytime you question whether your client has capacity, right? Do they clearly understand everything? Then you got to question it and get a partnership in there to help make the whole thing go a little bit, and also make sure it secures your position that the decision always comes. And it may be to take them to an attorney, or have them go to an attorney and draw something up to give capacity to somebody else. I don't know. But I think that's the big question.
Yeah, I would add to this that I had a transaction a few years ago, and the wife and family lived in the home, and the husband lived in an apartment, and he was a serious alcoholic. And so anytime I had to get any agreement with him, I learned after a few weeks that I needed to talk to him before 11 in the morning plus or minus a little bit, sometimes before 10 in the morning, because then he'd have a reasonably clear mind. And after that, he wouldn't remember anything we talked about. And then, you know, he would his personality changed. So it's possible even with elderly that there's moments of clarity throughout the day that are consistent. And so maybe that moment is very early in the morning. Maybe it's after they've eaten a meal. Maybe it's, you know, later in the day, but those are little tricks. And then to get that transaction closed, I literally had to ask him one day if I could talk to his attorney, so I could just send things to his attorney to get his blessing too. And he thought, wow, that's really nice of you. Well, you know, my ulterior motive was I needed to share with the attorney what was happening and get the attorney on my side. So the attorney could call him and say, sign that damn thing. So, you know, he had a relationship with his attorney for many years, but he had a relationship for me for many weeks. So, you know, there's, you know, definitely one great solution is to get someone else involved that they trust, because the last thing you want to do is close the deal and then have other people come out of the woodwork and say, not only elder abuse, but that they didn't have the mental capacity to do the deal. And so they try to unwind the transaction. And I have that happening right now. At least it was last fall with someone. It was a sister that came along. We sold and closed the house. A brother, the parent died, left it to a brother and a sister. The brother had power of attorney. He was the executor. So he said, we're selling this house. Well, now the sister turned around after the closing and got an attorney. And, you know, I don't know how it's all worked out in the last few months, but, you know, those kinds of things start to happen. So we just have to be more careful about everything.
Thanks.
So what were we talking about?
No, thanks for the great tips with your advice and experience, guys. Okay, just to wrap it up, let's have Mark share. He saw an email from RMLS that I know it's easy to miss sometimes with lots of emails coming through.
So actually two things to say. First of all is I also got a notification Freedom Home Warranty has apparently gone out of business in the last week. They've now posted their website, and if you've put a policy in place for any of your clients, you need to make sure that that policy may still be in place. It likely is not. So look into that. Second of all, is we got an email from RMLS, and they've announced on the RMLS website that normally listings and regulations do not allow no showings during an active listing. However, RMLS has said they will not be enforcing that. So in the light of all the COVID concern, they will allow no showings, the phrase no showings, in the private comments for active listings. So don't be surprised if you start to see that. They're not, it's obviously, they will not be considering that a violation. They'll be, that's dependent, obviously, how we can all run our business.
Mark, can you repeat part one of your two-part comment?
So part one is the notification that Freedom Home Warranty is apparently no longer in business.
So yeah, we'll look into that because a lot of us probably have those in place just since they used to be in our office that are still within the year.
We had one that was in contract with them last week that when we went to order it was that day that they actually folded. It was, I guess there were earthquakes, their headquarters in Utah, that combined with COVID, they just couldn't keep it going anymore. But they're very, it's easy to switch over. And I heard that they're going to be continuing the policy through the year that they have, but I'm still waiting on an answer to that. But I think the policies that they have out are still in effect. But we just switched it to another provider. It was pretty easy.
Good.
Awesome. Thanks. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for that, Mark. And again, yeah, if anyone has anything to share from the news, from their own experiences,
Yeah,
the
I
more
have a question.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Melinda.
One more. Okay, so I have a deal that fell apart. We're trying to put it back together. We need to do another appraisal. And I'm trying to figure out how to work this because I have a seller that is actually quite sick. And so is there any way to get around the appraisal? I mean.
Is Josh still on the line?
Josh,
I know.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out how to unmute myself again. So it really sort of depends on the program. Was this one of your jumbos?
Yes.
Yes. They're going to need a new appraisal more than likely. They have the old appraisal. If the appraiser who wrote that appraisal is, part of the appraisal management company that the other lender contracted with as well, then it's possible they could, get that same appraiser to essentially just rewrite it under the new lender's name. So transfer it, so to speak. There'll be, additional fee for it, but generally not as much as a full appraisal. And then more than likely they won't have to go back out for, another full inspection. However, how long ago was it they got the first appraisal?
I'm going to say 3 weeks ago.
So it's possible that they could transfer it over. It depends again on if the appraiser's willing to do it. If the, and if the, the previous lender, if the previous lender will release it, which they should, as long as it was paid for already by the, by the borrower. So they should be able to release it. It's possible you might be able to get it transferred over. What you'd want to do is contact the appraiser, directly and work with the new lender and talk to them about it and see if there's some way they can, they can make that work. They would have to reorder it. But if they could, get it through that same appraiser, that might work.
Help.
So, but as lenders, we have to keep, the appraisal process at arm's length. And so there's, so as, to not be influencing the result, but if everybody works together, sometimes you can make it happen.
Well, so no, thank you, because I was trying to figure out exactly how that would occur, but I will 100% reach out to the appraiser and kind of try and figure out where he sits in what AMC. So very helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
And I'll speak to that also, Linda, because I've done it. So I called my clients, or I actually got the appraisal released. I had the seller. I got the appraisal released by the buyers, saw the name of the appraiser, called the appraiser. He had no interest in redoing it. He was super busy. And so as I recall, I ended up offering him double the original appraisal price to do it. And he said he would. And so I said, okay, we're going to switch the loan and I'm going to have this lender call you and just tell them that you're charging double and I'll get it done. Right. So I told the seller, I said, if you want this to close, you have to pay for this appraisal. My seller said, okay. So I know you can be creative.
What year was that?
Huh? Oh, that was back in 10.
Well, yeah, that was, we had a little more touch on.
You can still call the appraiser.
Yeah, no, I will 100%. But we don't have that whole, we didn't have that AMC thing to go through.
Well, you can still call the appraiser and you can still say, and if they say, yeah, I'll do it, you're good. Say, okay, I'm sending it to whoever I'm sending to. And if he says no, you can say, well, would you do it for double? And he'd say, well, yeah, I'd do it for double. Then you say, okay, well, tell the new lender that, and then I'm going to have an email sent by my seller to the new lender that I'll pay X to get that appraisal transferred.
Okay, all right.
So it's very arm's length. You're not interfering with the appraisal itself.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. And then just to respect everyone's time, we're just about out of time today, but we will catch everyone back on Wednesday. And on Wednesday, we're going to talk more about what everyone's doing to help cope with this time, help our clients get through this, and just how everybody processes things differently and how to adjust depending on where your clients and friends and the people you're interacting with are at. Dwight or Tanya or Heather, any last words?
I'd like to thank everyone for participating. I've talked to a lot of realtors at other companies that aren't doing anything like this. And so I just am so appreciative that people take the time to call. I would share that we were just on the call with Josh Team, who is the president of the company, and he said that they are getting some data from Command because people started entering their pipelines and contact lists in Command in the fourth quarter of 18 and early 19. And so what they said was, he broke it down this way. He said that in March, the average pipeline they were looking at, if you considered the average pipeline to have 10 still active buyers and sellers, that number is going down. It's going down, and he said it would look like 3. And so what they're saying is that May and June are going to be the challenge. March was a warm up, and May and June will be the big challenges. And so, you know, their message was to double up on our activities. And, you know, people are using Command. The engagement is completely up. They can watch it, and people are saving money by switching some of their lead gen platforms to Command and some of the other software they use to Command. And so I thought I'd throw that out there. And on Wednesday, I'll carve out some time and talk about like 10 other points that I wrote down from his message.
Awesome. Tanya?
Yeah, no.
All right, everyone, have a great day. We'll catch you on Wednesday.
See ya.
All right, see you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.